The dust kicked up around Josephine Keller's worn boots as the stagecoach pulled away, leaving her standing alone in front of the Copper Ridge Inn in the heart of Nevada territory, watching the only man she'd trusted disappear into the horizon with everything she owned. Her chest tightened as reality settled over her like a heavy blanket. Marcus had seemed so genuine, so kind when he'd offered to escort her from St. Louis to California, where her aunt supposedly waited. He'd paid for their travel, their meals, and promised to marry her once they reached Sacramento. She'd believed every word, trusted him with the small inheritance her father had left her. And now she stood here with nothing but the dress on her back and a growing sense of dread in her stomach. The September sun beat down mercilessly as Josephine turned to face the inn. She'd been staying here for 3 days while Marcus claimed to be arranging their continued travel. 3 days of meals, a room, and services she now had no way to pay for. Her hands trembled as she pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped into the relative coolness of the establishment. The innkeeper, a stout woman with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun, looked up from the ledger she was studying. Her expression shifted from neutral to suspicious in an instant. "Miss Keller, I was just about to come find you. Your gentleman friend settled the bill," he said. Josephine's heart sank further. "He did. Said he'd be right back with the payment. That was 4 hours ago." The woman's eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't be trying to skip out on what you owe, would you?" "No, madam, I would never." Josephine's voice came out smaller than she intended. "How much is the bill?" $15 for the room and meals. $15 might as well have been 1,500. Josephine had nothing. She swallowed hard, trying to maintain what little dignity she had left. "I'm afraid there's been a terrible misunderstanding. The man who just left, Marcus Webb, he took all my money. I have no way to pay you right now, but I promise I'll find work and pay you back every cent." The innkeeper's face hardened. "That's what they all say. I've heard every sob story there is, girl. You pay now or I'm calling the sheriff." "Please, I'm telling the truth. I had $300 when I arrived in this territory. He took it all." Desperation crept into Josephine's voice. At 22 years old, she'd left everything behind in Missouri to start fresh, to escape the memories of her parents' deaths and the uncle who'd been pressuring her to marry his business partner. She'd thought Marcus was her salvation. Instead, he'd been her ruin. The sheriff it is, then. The innkeeper moved toward the door. "Wait." Josephine reached out but didn't touch the woman. "Please, just give me 1 day. I'll find something, I'll work, I'll do anything. You think I'm running a charity here. This is a business." The innkeeper's expression held no sympathy. The door swung open before she could exit, and a man stepped inside, removing his hat as he entered. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sandy brown hair and eyes the color of creek water after a rain. Dust covered his dark pants and blue shirt, and he had the weathered look of someone who spent his days working under the sun. He couldn't have been more than 25, Josephine guessed, with a strong jaw and an air of quiet confidence. "Morning, Mrs. Patterson," he said, his voice deep and warm. "I'm looking for a room for the night. Mr. Riley, good to see you." The innkeeper's demeanor changed entirely. "I have a room available. $2 for the night, meals included." The man nodded, reaching for his pocket, but his eyes had already found Josephine. She must have looked as desperate as she felt because his brow furrowed with concern. "Is everything all right here?" "Nothing that concerns you," Mrs. Patterson said quickly. "Just a matter of an unpaid bill." "I can pay," Josephine interjected, though she knew it was futile. "I just need time." The man, Mr. Riley, looked between them. "How much is owed?" $15, Mrs. Patterson said. "But it's not your concern, Mr. Riley." He was already pulling bills from his pocket. Josephine watched in stunned silence as he counted out the money and placed it on the counter. "This covers her bill and my room." "Mr. Riley, you don't have to do that," Mrs. Patterson protested, though she was already reaching for the money. "I know I don't have to." His eyes met Josephine's and she saw nothing but kindness there. "But I am." Josephine found her voice, though it shook. "Sir, I cannot accept such generosity. I don't even know you." "Name's Harrison Riley," he said, extending his hand. "I own a ranch about 10 miles from here. And you look like someone who's had a rough day and could use a little help." She took his hand, feeling the calluses that spoke of hard work. Josephine Keller, and rough doesn't begin to describe it. The warmth of his palm against hers sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. She pulled back quickly, propriety dictating she not hold a stranger's hand too long. Mrs. Patterson pocketed the money, her expression softening slightly. "Well, Miss Keller, your bill is settled. I suppose you'll be needing another night." Josephine opened her mouth but had no answer. She couldn't afford another night and she had nowhere else to go. "Give her a room," Harrison said. "I'll cover it." "No." Josephine's pride flared despite her circumstances. "You've already done too much. I won't impose further." Harrison studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Then how about this? I need to hire someone to help my housekeeper. She's getting on in years and the work is too much for her alone. Room and board included, plus wages. If you're interested, we can discuss it over breakfast tomorrow." It was charity dressed up as an offer, and they both knew it. But Josephine was in no position to refuse. She'd been raised to be independent, taught by her mother to never rely too heavily on anyone, but circumstances had stripped her of choices. She could accept this man's help or end up on the street or worse, in jail. "I'm a hard worker," she said, lifting her chin. "I may have been foolish enough to trust the wrong man, but I'm not lazy. If you're truly offering employment, I'll earn every cent you pay me." Something like respect flickered in Harrison's eyes. "I don't doubt it. Mrs. Patterson, 2 rooms, please." The innkeeper handed over 2 keys, her suspicious expression returning as she looked at Josephine. "Breakfast is at 7 sharp. Don't be late." Josephine took the key, her fingers brushing Harrison's as she did. "Thank you," she whispered, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness. Just show up for breakfast," he said with a slight smile. "We'll figure out the rest from there." She climbed the stairs to her room, aware of his eyes following her. Once inside, she collapsed onto the bed and let the tears come. She cried for her foolishness, for trusting Marcus, for the parents she'd lost and the life she'd left behind. But underneath the despair, a tiny spark of something else flickered. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just the memory of kind creek water eyes and a strong, calloused hand. The room was simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small window overlooking the main street of Copper Ridge. The town was modest, with perhaps 24 buildings lining the dusty road. She could see the general store, a saloon, what looked like a doctor's office, and the sheriff's station. Beyond the town, the Nevada landscape stretched out in shades of brown and gold, dotted with sagebrush and the occasional twisted juniper tree. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks touching a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. Josephine washed her face in the basin, studying her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins, curling around her face in the dry heat. Her blue eyes were red from crying, and her face was thinner than it had been a month ago. The journey west had been hard, and Marcus's betrayal had left its mark. She thought about Harrison Riley. What kind of man paid a stranger's debts without hesitation? Either a fool or someone with a genuinely kind heart. She hoped it was the latter, though her recent experience with Marcus had left her wary of trusting her own judgment. Still, There had been something different about Harrison. Where Marcus's charm had been smooth and practiced, Harrison's kindness seemed almost reluctant, as if he'd acted on instinct rather than calculation. Sleep came fitfully that night. Josephine kept waking, half convinced she dreamed the entire encounter and would wake to find Mrs. Patterson hauling her off to jail. But each time she opened her eyes, she was still in the small clean room, and the key Harrison had paid for was still on the bedside table. Morning came with golden light streaming through the window. Josephine rose, wishing desperately for a change of clothes. She did her best to freshen up, rebraiding her hair and pinning it in a neat coil at the base of her neck. The dress she'd been wearing for 3 days was wrinkled but relatively clean. It would have to do. The dining room downstairs was already occupied when she descended at 7 sharp. Several men sat at various tables, eating what looked like eggs, bacon, and biscuits. The smell made her stomach growl, reminding her that she'd been too upset to eat dinner the night before. Harrison sat alone at a table by the window. He'd cleaned up since yesterday, his hair damp and combed back, his face freshly shaved. He wore a clean shirt, and when he looked up and saw her, he stood, something Josephine hadn't expected. Most men out here in the territories weren't much for Eastern manners. "Miss Keller," he said, pulling out a chair for her, "I hope you slept well." "As well as could be expected," she replied honestly, sitting down. "And you?" "Well enough." He returned to his own seat. "I took the liberty of ordering for both of us. I hope that's all right." "It's more than all right." "You've been incredibly generous." Josephine folded her hands in her lap, trying to ignore how aware she was of him across the table. In the morning light, she could see his eyes were actually hazel, shifting between green and brown depending on how the light hit them. He had a small scar above his left eyebrow and laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though his expression now was serious. Mrs. Patterson brought 2 plates loaded with food, setting them down with more force than necessary. She still clearly disapproved of Josephine, but she held her tongue. "So," Harrison said once the innkeeper had left, "tell me about yourself, Miss Keller. Where are you from?" Josephine cut into her eggs, considering how much to share. "St. Louis originally. My parents owned a small bookshop there. They both died last winter, influenza. I lived with my uncle for a few months after, but he had plans for my future that didn't align with my own." "The business partner marriage?" Harrison asked perceptively. She nodded. "How did you know?" "It's a common enough story. Family trying to control a young woman's choices." He paused. "So you decided to head west?" "My mother had a sister in Sacramento. We'd lost touch over the years, but I thought maybe she'd help me start fresh. I met Marcus Webb at a church social in St. Louis. He said he was heading to California, offered to escort me. Seemed like Providence at the time. And instead he robbed you." The blunt statement made her flinch. "Yes, I thought I was being careful. I thought I was making a smart choice, getting away from one bad situation. Instead, I walked right into another." Harrison set down his fork, leaning forward slightly. "Miss Keller, what happened to you wasn't your fault. Men like that, they're skilled at deception. They know exactly what to say, how to seem trustworthy. You were grieving and trying to escape a difficult situation. He took advantage of that." The understanding in his voice nearly undid her. She blinked back tears, determined not to cry in the middle of the dining room. "That's kind of you to say." "It's not kindness, it's fact." He resumed eating, giving her time to compose herself. "Tell me about your parents' bookshop. Did you work there?" Grateful for the change of subject, Josephine nodded. "Every day since I was tall enough to reach the counter. I loved it. The smell of the books, the customers, helping people find exactly the story they needed. My mother taught me to read when I was 4, and I've never stopped. Books were my closest companions growing up. Must have been hard to leave that behind. Harder than I expected. She took a bite of biscuit, surprised by how good it tasted. My uncle sold the shop almost immediately after my parents died. Said there was no point in keeping it since I'd be married soon and couldn't run it myself. Harrison's jaw tightened. Could you have run it yourself? I'd been helping run it for years. I knew the suppliers, the customers, the bookkeeping, but no one would take a 22-year-old woman seriously as a business owner. The old frustration bubbled up. So yes, I could have, but I wasn't given the chance. That's not right. No, it's not. But it's the way things are. She met his eyes. Which is why I'm grateful for your offer of employment, Mr. Riley. I meant what I said yesterday. I'll work hard for you. He was quiet for a moment, studying her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Then he set down his fork and cleared his throat. Miss Keller, I need to be honest with you about something. Her stomach dropped. Here it came, the catch. There was always a catch. I do need help at the ranch, he continued. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen. She's wonderful, but she's 67 years old and the work is too much for her. That part was true, but I have to tell you, I have another reason for wanting to help you. Josephine set down her own fork, her appetite vanishing. What reason is that? Harrison took a deep breath, and if she didn't know better, she'd think he looked nervous. Miss Keller, Josephine, I know we only just met yesterday. I know this is going to sound insane and you have every right to say no. But I've been thinking about it all night and I believe it might be the best solution for both of us. What might be? He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. Marry me. The words hung in the air between them. Josephine stared at him, convinced she'd misheard. I beg your pardon. I'm asking you to marry me, Harrison repeated, his voice steady despite the wild nature of what he was proposing. I know it sounds crazy, we're strangers, but hear me out before you say no. Josephine's heart hammered against her ribs. Mr. Riley, I appreciate everything you've done for me, but I can't marry you. I don't know you, and I certainly don't want you to feel obligated to rescue me. It's not obligation. He pulled his hand back, running it through his hair. All right, maybe a little obligation, but not in the way you think. Let me explain. She should stand up and walk away. She should tell him he was mad and she wasn't interested in another scheme that seemed too good to be true. But something in his expression kept her seated. I'm listening. I'm 26 years old. I've had my ranch for 4 years now, built it up from almost nothing. I have 200 head of cattle, good grazing land, and a house that's sturdy and comfortable. I'm not wealthy, but I'm not poor either. I can provide for a wife, provide well. That's admirable, but it doesn't explain why you'd want to marry a complete stranger. Because I need a wife, he said simply. Out here, life is hard. It's lonely. I've been thinking for the past year that I should marry, but there aren't exactly a lot of options in Copper Ridge. The few unmarried women around are either too young or already spoken for. I was planning to place an advertisement back east for a mail-order bride. Understanding began to dawn. So I'd be convenient. No. His voice was firm. You'd be a partner. That's what I'm offering. A partnership, a real marriage. Not convenience, not charity. We'd be building a life together. You don't know anything about me. I know you're brave. You left everything familiar to start fresh somewhere new. I know you're honest. You could have tried to run out on that bill yesterday, but you didn't. You faced the consequences head on. I know you're educated and you loved your parents enough to honor them by keeping their business running. He leaned forward again. And I know that when I helped you yesterday, you didn't simper or flutter your eyelashes or try to manipulate me. You were grateful, but you also made it clear you'd pay your own way if given the chance. That tells me you have integrity. Josephine's mind raced. Everything he said was true, but it didn't change the fundamental insanity of what he was proposing. "Mr. Riley, just yesterday I was left stranded by a man I thought I knew, a man I trusted. Forgive me if I'm not eager to immediately accept another proposal from another stranger. I'm not Marcus Webb." "How do I know that you don't?" he admitted. "Not for certain, but I'm asking you to take a chance the same way I'm taking a chance on you." He pulled something from his pocket and set it on the table between them. It was a small leather pouch. "There's $50 in there. Take it. Whether you agree to marry me or not, it's yours. Use it to get to Sacramento or use it to start over somewhere else or save it. I don't care. I just want you to know that I'm not trying to trap you or control you. I'm offering you a choice." Josephine stared at the pouch. $50 was a small fortune. It was freedom, options, a future. He was giving it to her with no strings attached. "Why would you do this?" "Because I saw something in your eyes yesterday. Determination. Strength. The kind of qualities that make someone survive out here. And because you deserve better than being abandoned and cheated." He pushed the pouch closer to her. "Take it. Think about my proposal. If your answer is no, I'll take you to the stage depot this afternoon and see you safely on your way to California. If your answer is yes, we can be married today. The circuit preacher is in town. I saw him at the saloon last night. Today." The word came out as a squeak. "No point in waiting. Like I said, I was planning to look for a mail-order bride anyway. This way, we've at least met in person first." He smiled slightly. "That's more than a lot of marriages out here start with." He wasn't wrong. Josephine knew plenty of couples who'd met for the first time on their wedding day. At least she and Harrison had had a conversation first. She looked at him, really looked at him, trying to see past the kindness to what lay beneath. He met her gaze steadily, not looking away, not trying to hide anything. "What would you expect from this marriage?" she asked carefully. "What would my role be?" "You'd run the household. Cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing, though Mrs. Chen would help. You'd be the lady of the house. Beyond that, we'd figure it out as we go." He paused. "I won't force anything on you, Josephine. If you need time before we become a true husband and wife in every sense, I'll respect that. We'd share the house, but you'd have your own room until you decided otherwise." The fact that he'd addressed the unspoken question directly, and with such respect, made something in her chest loosen. "You'd give me that time, that choice? I'd insist on it. I want a partner, not someone who feels trapped or obligated. When we come together, if we do, I want it to be because we both want to." Josephine picked up the leather pouch, feeling the weight of the coins inside. She could leave. She could take this money and head to Sacramento, hope her aunt would take her in. Or she could stay with a man who'd shown her more genuine kindness in one day than Marcus had in weeks. A man who was offering her a home, a purpose, and respect. "I have conditions," she heard herself say. Hope flickered across Harrison's face. "Name them." "I want to continue reading. If I marry you, I want access to books, maybe even the chance to order them. We'll set up an account with the general store, order whatever you want. And I want to be included in decisions about the ranch. I know I don't know anything about cattle or ranching, but if I'm going to be your partner, I want to actually be your partner, not just the woman who cooks your meals." "Agreed. I'll teach you everything about the ranch. Your input would be welcome." She took a deep breath. "And I want honesty. Always. Even if the truth is hard or uncomfortable, I never want to be deceived again. I can promise you that." Harrison's expression was solemn. "And I'd ask the same from you. Honesty, always." This was insane. This was the craziest thing she'd ever considered, and that included trusting Marcus Webb. But as she sat there in the morning sunlight, looking at Harrison Riley's earnest face, Josephine felt something shift inside her. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was desperation. Or maybe it was simply the recognition that sometimes life threw you a rope when you were drowning, and you had to be brave enough to grab it. "All right," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Harrison's face broke into a genuine smile, and it transformed him. Gone was the serious, reserved cowboy, replaced by someone who looked young and hopeful and almost boyish. "Yes, you mean it. I must be insane, but yes." Josephine found herself smiling back. "I'll marry you, Harrison Riley." He stood up abruptly, then seemed to realize he didn't know what to do next. He sat back down. "Right, good, that's good." He laughed, running his hand through his hair again. "I thought you'd say no." "I probably should have." But even as she said it, Josephine felt the rightness of her decision settling over her. It might not be a conventional love story, but it felt honest, real, built on respect and clear expectations rather than false promises and manipulation. "We should find the preacher," Harrison said, his smile still in place. "Unless you want to wait, we could wait if you need more time." Josephine shook her head. "No, if we're doing this, let's do it now before I lose my nerve." They finished breakfast quickly, both too excited and nervous to have much appetite. Harrison paid Mrs. Patterson, who watched their animated conversation with obvious curiosity but didn't ask questions. As they stepped out into the morning sunshine, Harrison offered Josephine his arm. She took it, feeling the solid strength of him through his shirt sleeve. "Where do we find this preacher?" "The saloon, probably. He likes his morning whiskey." Sure enough, they found Reverend Thomas at a corner table in the Silver Spur Saloon, a glass of amber liquid in front of him. He was a rotund man with a red nose and kind eyes, wearing a dusty black coat and a clerical collar that had seen better days. "Mr. Riley," he boomed when he saw them. "Come to repent your sins." "Come to get married, actually," Harrison replied. "This is Miss Josephine Keller." "Josephine, Reverend Thomas." The preacher's eyebrows shot up. "Married? Well now, this is unexpected. I didn't know you were courting anyone, Riley." "It's a recent development," Harrison said diplomatically. Reverend Thomas looked between them, his expression sharpening despite the early morning drink. "This is all legal and proper. The lady is willing." "I am," Josephine said firmly, "completely willing. And you're of age, both of you." "I'm 22, Josephine said. "Mr. Riley is 26. Any legal impediments? Either of you married already, wanted by the law?" When they both shook their heads, he nodded. "All right then, I'll do it. But I want to speak to the lady alone first." Harrison looked like he wanted to protest, but Josephine squeezed his arm. "It's fine, I'll meet you outside." Once Harrison had left, Reverend Thomas gestured to a chair. Josephine sat, folding her hands in her lap. "Miss Keller," the preacher said gently, "I'm going to ask you straight. Is Riley forcing you into this? Are you being coerced in any way?" "No. He's given me money to leave town if I choose. He's made it clear I have options." "Then why marry a man you just met?" Josephine considered her answer carefully. "Because he's offering me a partnership, Reverend. Not romance, not false promises, but an honest arrangement built on mutual respect. After the year I've had, that sounds better than any flowery declaration of love." The preacher studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I've been doing this for 30 years, girl. I've married people who barely spoke the same language, people who met 5 minutes before I said the vows, people with all sorts of arrangements. Some of those marriages failed. But you know what? Some of them turned into the strongest unions I've ever seen. Because they started with honesty instead of illusion. That's what I'm hoping for. Riley's a good man. Works hard, treats people fair, doesn't drink or gamble to excess. You could do worse. I know I have done worse." Reverend Thomas laughed at that. "Fair enough. All right, Miss Keller. If you're sure about this, let's make you a wife." They stepped outside where Harrison waited, his hat in his hands, turning it nervously. "Everything all right. Everything's fine," Josephine assured him. "The Reverend just wanted to make sure I wasn't being forced, and you told him you weren't." I told him the truth, that I'm choosing this freely. Relief washed over Harrison's face. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You don't know what kind of wife I'll make. I'll take my chances." Reverend Thomas cleared his throat. "Do you folks want to do this in the church? Or would you prefer somewhere else?" Josephine looked at Harrison, who shrugged. "Up to you." She thought about it. A church wedding would be more traditional, but somehow it didn't feel right for this practical arrangement they were making. What about outside, under the open sky? Harrison's face lit up. "I'd like that." They walked to the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open land. The Nevada landscape stretched before them, vast and unforgiving and beautiful in its own stark way. The mountains in the distance seemed to touch the endless blue sky, and a light breeze carried the scent of sagebrush. Reverend Thomas positioned himself facing them, pulling a worn Bible from his coat pocket. "Do you have a ring?" Harrison froze. "I didn't think about that." "I don't need a ring," Josephine said quickly, but Harrison was already removing a ring from his own hand. It was silver, simple and thick, clearly too large for her but beautiful in its plainness. "This was my father's," Harrison said, holding it up. "He gave it to my mother when they married. After they died, I wore it to remember them. I know it doesn't fit, but we can get you a proper one later." Josephine felt tears prick her eyes as she looked at the ring. He was giving her a family heirloom, something that clearly meant a great deal to him. "Harrison, I can't take your father's ring. I want you to have it. My parents had a good marriage, a true partnership. Maybe it'll bring us luck." He smiled slightly. "And I can always wear it again if you leave me." The joke made her laugh despite her nerves. "I promise not to leave you." "That's good, because we're about to make it official." Reverend Thomas opened his Bible. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God and this open land to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was simple and quick. No fancy vows, no long sermon, just the essential words that would bind them together. When Reverend Thomas asked if she took Harrison as her husband, Josephine's voice didn't waver. "I do." Harrison's voice was equally steady when he said the same. He slipped the oversized ring onto her finger, and she had to curl her hand to keep it from sliding off. "Then, by the power vested in me by the Nevada Territory and the Almighty God, I pronounce you husband and wife." Reverend Thomas snapped his Bible shut. "Riley, you may kiss your bride." Harrison's eyes met hers, a question in them. Josephine nodded slightly, and he leaned down, pressing his lips gently to hers. It was brief, chaste, nothing like the passionate kisses she'd read about in novels. But it was sweet and respectful, and when he pulled back, Josephine found herself smiling. "Hello, husband," she said softly. "Hello, wife," he replied, and the words sent a flutter through her stomach. They paid Reverend Thomas, who pocketed the money and headed back to the saloon, muttering about the need for another drink after performing matrimony at such an ungodly early hour. That left Harrison and Josephine standing alone at the edge of town, married but still essentially strangers. "So," Harrison said, breaking the silence, "I suppose we should head to the ranch, unless you need to get anything from the inn." "I don't have anything to get. Everything I owned is long gone." The reality of that still stung, but it felt less devastating than it had yesterday. Yesterday she'd had nothing and no prospects. Today she had a husband and a future, however uncertain. "We'll get you some things. Clothes, whatever you need." Harrison gestured toward the main street. "I have a wagon and horses at the livery. Wait here, I'll bring them around." He strode off, leaving Josephine alone with her thoughts. She looked down at the ring on her finger, oversized and weighty. Mrs. Harrison Riley. That was her name now. She'd left Missouri as Josephine Keller, been betrayed by Marcus Webb, and married Harrison Riley all in the span of a few weeks. Life had a funny way of taking unexpected turns. The sound of horses and wheels on dirt announced Harrison's return. He drove a sturdy wagon pulled by two bay horses, the back loaded with supplies covered by canvas. He jumped down and offered his hand to help her up to the seat. "Thank you," she said as she settled beside him. The wagon seat put them close together, their shoulders nearly touching. She was acutely aware of his presence, the way he smelled of soap and leather, the capable way he handled the reins. "We'll stop at the general store first," Harrison said as he guided the horses down the street. "Get you some supplies." "Harrison, you've spent enough money on me. The inn, breakfast, the preacher, that $50 you gave me. I don't want you to think I married you for your money." He glanced at her, his expression serious. "Josephine, you're my wife now. Providing for you isn't charity, it's my responsibility. Besides, you'll be working hard at the ranch. You deserve to have decent clothes and whatever else you need." The general store was crowded with goods, everything from food staples to farming equipment to bolts of fabric. The proprietor, a thin man with spectacles, greeted Harrison warmly. "Mr. Riley, good to see you. What can I do for you today?" "Afternoon, Mr. Sanders." "I need to set up an account for my wife." Mr. Sanders's eyes widened. "Your wife? I didn't know you'd gotten married. Just this morning." Harrison placed his hand on the small of Josephine's back, a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. "This is Mrs. Riley." "Josephine, this is Albert Sanders. He runs the best general store in the territory." "The only general store in Copper Ridge," Mr. Sanders corrected with a smile. "But I appreciate the compliment. Mrs. Riley, it's a pleasure. Welcome to town." "Thank you," Josephine said, warming to his genuine friendliness. "My wife needs everything," Harrison told him. "Dresses, undergarments, shoes, whatever a woman needs, and set up a standing account. She's to get whatever she wants whenever she wants it. Charge it to me." "Harrison," Josephine protested quietly, but he shook his head. "No arguments. You're my wife now. Let me do this." For the next hour, Josephine selected items under Mr. Sanders's helpful guidance. 3 simple dresses, 2 more practical for work and 1 nicer for occasions. Undergarments, stockings, a nightgown, a sturdy pair of boots and a lighter pair of shoes, a warm coat for winter, a hairbrush, pins, ribbon. The pile grew, and so did Josephine's guilt. "This is too much," she told Harrison as Mr. Sanders wrapped everything in brown paper. "It's necessary." "You can't work in 1 dress." Harrison pulled out his wallet. "What's the damage, Albert?" $47 even. Harrison counted out the bills without flinching, though Josephine knew it was a significant sum. "Add a dozen books to the account too. Whatever my wife wants. Have them sent out to the ranch when they arrive." "Books?" Mr. Sanders looked delighted. "Well, that's wonderful. I have a catalog here, Mrs. Riley. You can look through it and mark what you'd like." "I couldn't possibly," Josephine started, but Harrison cut her off. "Yes, you could. You said reading was important to you. Consider it a wedding present." The kindness of the gesture overwhelmed her. She blinked back tears as she took the catalog from Mr. Sanders. "Thank you." By the time they finished at the general store and loaded the packages into the wagon, it was past noon. Harrison drove them out of town, heading west on a dusty road that cut through the scrubland. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Josephine was grateful for the bonnet she'd purchased. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, partly to learn more about her new home and partly to fill the silence. "It's called the Rolling R," Harrison said. "My father started it before I was born, but he died when I was 10. My mother tried to keep it going, but it was hard. She died when I was 22, and I inherited what was left. Wasn't much at that point, just 50 acres and maybe 30 head of cattle. I've built it up since then. That must have been difficult, losing both your parents. It was, but it taught me to work hard to value what I have. He glanced at her. What about you? You said your parents died last winter. How did you manage after? Not well, Josephine admitted. I was grieving and not thinking clearly. My uncle took over everything. I should have fought harder to keep the bookshop, but I didn't have the energy. And then when he started pushing me to marry his partner, a man 30 years my senior, I just wanted to escape. That's when I met Marcus. The man who abandoned you. Yes. He seemed kind at first, attentive. He said all the right things. Looking back, I can see the manipulation, but at the time I was just grateful someone seemed to care. She twisted the oversized ring on her finger. I'm not usually so gullible. You weren't gullible, you were vulnerable. There's a difference. Harrison's voice was firm. Stop blaming yourself for his actions. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves. The landscape began to change gradually, the flat scrubland giving way to rolling hills dotted with more vegetation. Josephine spotted cattle in the distance, their reddish-brown coats stark against the golden grass. Those are mine, Harrison said with unmistakable pride. Herefords, good beef cattle, hardy enough for this climate. How many do you have? Right now, about 200 head. I'm hoping to increase that in the next few years. There's good money in beef if you can get the cattle to market. What's involved in running a cattle ranch? Josephine asked, genuinely curious. Harrison launched into an explanation of the various tasks: branding, castrating the bull calves, checking for disease, maintaining fences, managing grazing rotation. Josephine listened, fascinated despite the sometimes graphic details. This was her life now, her future. She needed to understand it. It sounds like incredibly hard work, she said when he finished. It is, but it's also rewarding. You raise something from nothing, watch it grow, know that your efforts matter. He gestured ahead. There, that's home. Josephine followed his gaze and saw a house in the distance. As they drew closer, she could make out the details. It was a single-story structure made of wood and stone, larger than she'd expected. A porch wrapped around the front, and there were several outbuildings nearby, including what looked like a barn and a bunkhouse. It's bigger than I thought, she admitted. My father built the original cabin, but I've added on over the years. There are 4 bedrooms, a kitchen, a parlor, and a dining room. Nothing fancy, but it's solid and comfortable. Harrison pulled the wagon up in front of the house. Mrs. Chen should be inside. She lives in the small cabin out back. As if summoned by her name, the front door opened and a petite Chinese woman emerged. She was indeed older, her black hair streaked with gray and pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple blue dress and an apron, and her face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and bright. Mr. Riley, she said, her English accented but clear. You are back early. I did not expect you until tonight. I brought someone with me, Harrison said, jumping down from the wagon. He came around to help Josephine down, his hands steady on her waist. Mrs. Chen, this is my wife, Josephine. Josephine, this is Mrs. Chen. She's been keeping this place running for the past 2 years. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. Your wife? But I did not know you were courting. It was quick, Harrison admitted. We were married this morning in Copper Ridge. Mrs. Chen looked between them, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she smiled. Well, this is unexpected but welcome. Come inside. You must be tired from travel. The interior of the house was simple but comfortable. The main room served as both parlor and dining area, with a large table, several chairs, and a settee near the fireplace. Colorful rag rugs covered the wooden floor, and curtains hung at the windows. Everything was scrupulously clean. I will make tea, Mrs. Chen announced, bustling toward what must be the kitchen. "Let me show you the rest," Harrison said to Josephine. He led her down a hallway. "This is my room," he said, opening a door to reveal a spacious bedroom with a large bed, a wardrobe, and a washstand. "And this," he opened the next door, "would be yours. For now, I mean. Like I said, I want you to have your own space until you're comfortable." The second bedroom was slightly smaller but still generously sized. It had a bed, a wardrobe, a small desk, and a window overlooking the side yard. The bed was made with a colorful quilt, and there were fresh flowers in a vase on the desk. "Mrs. Chen must have put those there," Harrison said, nodding at the flowers. "She has a little garden out back." "It's lovely," Josephine said honestly. The room felt welcoming, safe. "Thank you, Harrison, for all of this. You don't have to thank me. This is your home now." He carried her packages in from the wagon, setting them on the bed. "I'll let you get settled. Take your time, no rush on anything." After he left, closing the door gently behind him, Josephine sat on the bed and looked around her new room. She felt strange, disconnected from reality. This morning she'd woken up at the inn, uncertain of her future. Now she was married, living in a ranch house in Nevada, with a husband she barely knew and a future that was both terrifying and promising. She unpacked her new belongings, hanging the dresses in the wardrobe and putting her undergarments in the drawers. The simple act of organizing her things helped ground her. When everything was put away, she changed into one of the new dresses, a practical brown cotton that fit reasonably well. Looking in the small mirror above the washstand, she saw a different woman than the one who'd arrived in Copper Ridge yesterday. She looked purposeful, like someone who belonged here. Josephine made her way back to the main room where she found Harrison and Mrs. Chen sitting at the table with tea and what looked like fresh bread and butter. "I hope you are hungry," Mrs. Chen said. "I baked this morning." "I'm starving," Josephine admitted, sitting down. The bread was delicious, still warm and perfectly textured. "This is wonderful, Mrs. Chen." "Please call me Lai Hua. Mrs. Chen is too formal for family." She poured tea for Josephine, the delicate china cup incongruous with the rough table. "So you must tell me how you met Mr. Riley." Josephine glanced at Harrison, unsure how much to share. He gave a slight nod, leaving it up to her. "I was in a difficult situation," Josephine said carefully. "I'd been left stranded in Copper Ridge with no money. Harrison paid my bill at the inn and offered me employment. When we talked this morning, he proposed a more permanent arrangement." Lai Hua's eyebrows rose. "And you accepted?" "I did." "That is very brave, or very desperate." But Lai Hua's tone wasn't judgmental, just matter of fact. "I came to America 30 years ago with a husband I had met only once before our wedding. It was an arranged marriage, very traditional. We did not love each other at first. But over time, we built something good. He was a good man. I miss him still." "I'm sorry for your loss," Josephine said softly. "That is life. People die, but we must keep living." Lai Hua turned to Harrison. "What are the plans? Will Mrs. Riley take over the household duties?" "We'll work together," Harrison said. "Josephine can learn from you, help with what she's comfortable with. I don't expect her to do everything alone." "I'm a hard worker," Josephine assured Lai Hua. "I may not know ranching or Western cooking, but I'm willing to learn." Lai Hua nodded approvingly. "Good. We will start tomorrow. Today you should rest, adjust. This is your wedding day, after all." The reminder that this was indeed her wedding day felt surreal. Most brides spent months planning their weddings, picking out dresses, arranging flowers. Josephine had gone from single to married in less than 2 hours, with no family present, no celebration, just a simple ceremony under the open sky. Yet somehow it felt right. After tea, Harrison showed Josephine around the property. The barn housed several horses. including a beautiful chestnut Mayor Harrison said was gentle enough for her to learn to ride. The bunkhouse currently sat empty. "I have 2 ranch hands who will be back in a few days," Harrison explained. "They're in Carson City picking up supplies. Good men, both of them. Miguel has been with me for 3 years and Tom for 2. There was a chicken coop with a dozen hens, a vegetable garden that Lai Hua tended, and a small orchard with apple and pear trees. Beyond the immediate buildings, the land stretched out in rolling hills, all belonging to the Rolling R. It's beautiful," Josephine said, shading her eyes as she looked out over the property. "Wild but beautiful. That's Nevada for you, unforgiving but honest. It doesn't pretend to be something it's not." Harrison stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the afternoon sun. "Are you scared?" The question surprised her with its directness. "A little," she admitted. "Everything has happened so fast. But I'm also hopeful. Is that strange?" "No, I feel the same way." He turned to face her. "Josephine, I want you to know something. I'm not good with flowery words or romantic gestures. I'm a simple man. But I meant what I said this morning about partnership. I'll work hard to make this marriage good, to be the kind of husband you deserve. And I'll do the same," Josephine promised. "I'll be a good wife to you, Harrison. I'll make this work." They stood there for a moment, 2 people who'd been strangers yesterday, now bound together for life. Then Harrison smiled, breaking the solemn mood. "Come on, I'll teach you how to feed the chickens. That seems like a good place to start your ranching education." The rest of the day passed in a blur of new experiences. Josephine scattered grain for the chickens, helped Lai Hua prepare dinner, and learned her way around the kitchen. Harrison showed her where everything was kept, from the water pump outside to the root cellar where they stored vegetables and preserved foods. Dinner was a revelation. Lai Hua had prepared a feast: roast chicken, fresh bread, vegetables from the garden, and a pie made with preserved apples. They ate at the large table, the 3 of them, and the conversation flowed easily. Lai Hua told stories about the early days of Copper Ridge, when it had been little more than a mining camp. Harrison talked about his plans for expanding the ranch, his ideas for improving the grazing land. Josephine mostly listened, soaking in the information, learning about her new world. But occasionally Harrison would turn to her, asking her opinion on something, including her in the conversation. It was a small thing, but it meant everything. He was keeping his promise about partnership. As darkness fell, Lai Hua excused herself to return to her cabin. "I will see you both in the morning," she said. "Sleep well." Her departure left Harrison and Josephine alone in the house. The sudden intimacy of the situation hit Josephine all at once. They were married, alone together. Even though Harrison had promised her own room, her own time, the reality of being married to a man she'd met yesterday became very real. "Would you like more tea?" Harrison asked, seemingly unaware of her sudden nervousness. "Or I could teach you to play checkers. I have a board around here somewhere." The normalcy of the suggestion calmed her. "Checkers sounds nice." They played 3 games at the table, the oil lamp casting a warm glow. Harrison won the first game handily. Josephine surprised him by winning the second, and the third ended in a draw. As they played, they talked about inconsequential things: favorite foods, childhood memories, books they'd read. It felt like a proper courtship, except in reverse, happening after the wedding instead of before. "I should probably turn in," Josephine finally said as the clock struck 9. "It's been a very long day." "Of course." Harrison stood when she did. "If you need anything during the night, just knock on my door. I'm a light sleeper." "I will. Thank you, Harrison, for everything today, for being patient and kind." "You don't have to thank me for treating you well, Josephine. That should be expected, not exceptional." He hesitated, then leaned down and kissed her forehead gently. "Good night, wife." "Good night, husband." In her room, Josephine changed into the new nightgown, brushed out her hair, and climbed into bed. The mattress was comfortable, the sheets clean and fresh. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. She should have been afraid, alone in a strange place with a man she barely knew. But instead, Josephine felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: safe. Harrison Riley might be a stranger, but he was an honorable one. She could build a life with him. Maybe not a passionate romance, but something solid and real. Sleep came easier than she expected. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the window and the sound of a rooster crowing. Josephine dressed quickly in one of her work dresses and made her way to the kitchen, where she found Lai Hua already at work. "Good morning," Lai Hua said. "You slept well." "Very well, actually." Josephine tied on an apron. "What can I do to help?" "You can learn to make biscuits. Mr. Riley loves biscuits with his breakfast." For the next hour, Lai Hua taught Josephine the art of making proper biscuits. The right ratio of flour to fat, how to work the dough without overworking it, the perfect temperature for baking. By the time Harrison came in from his morning chores, the kitchen smelled heavenly. "Are those biscuits?" he asked, his face lighting up like a child's. "Fresh from the oven," Lai Hua announced. "Your wife made them." Harrison's eyes met Josephine's. "You made these?" "Lai Hua taught me. I hope they are all right." He took a biscuit, broke it open, and took a bite. His expression was answer enough. "These are perfect. Josephine, if you never learn another thing about ranching, you've already earned your keep with these biscuits." The praise warmed her more than it should have. "I plan to learn a lot more than biscuits." Breakfast was a lively affair. Harrison talked about the work that needed doing that day: fence repairs in the south pasture. Lai Hua mentioned that her herbs needed harvesting. Josephine listened and asked questions, slowly building a picture of how the ranch operated. "Would you like to come with me today?" Harrison asked Josephine as they finished eating. "I could show you more of the land, introduce you to the cattle properly." "I'd like that." They set out after breakfast, riding in the wagon since Josephine didn't yet know how to ride. The morning air was cool, but the sun quickly warmed things up. Harrison pointed out landmarks as they drove: the creek that provided water for the cattle, the line of cottonwoods that marked the northern boundary of his property, the rocky outcropping where he sometimes spotted bighorn sheep. The south pasture was about 30 minutes from the house. Several lengths of fence were down, likely from cattle rubbing against them or perhaps from the wind. Harrison unhitched the horses and got to work, and Josephine did her best to help, holding boards steady while he hammered, fetching tools from the wagon. "You're a quick learner," Harrison said as they worked. "Most city women would be complaining about the heat and the dirt by now." "Most city women probably didn't grow up working in their parents' shop every day. I'm used to hard work, just not this kind of work." Josephine wiped sweat from her forehead. "Though I'll admit this heat is something else. It gets hotter. This is still relatively cool for Nevada." Harrison paused, leaning on the fence post. "Are you doing all right? Really all right, I mean. I know this has all been overwhelming." "I'm adjusting," Josephine said honestly. "It's strange being married to someone I barely know, but you've been nothing but kind and respectful. That makes it easier." "I'm glad." Harrison turned back to the fence, but not before Josephine caught a glimpse of something in his expression. Fondness, maybe, or hope. She wasn't sure, but it made her heart flutter slightly. They worked together for another hour before taking a break in the shade of the wagon. Harrison had brought a canteen of water and some leftover biscuits. They sat companionably, watching the cattle graze in the distance. "I've been thinking about something," Josephine said. You mentioned wanting my input on ranch decisions. I might not know much about cattle, but I'm good with numbers. I worked on my parents' bookkeeping for years. Maybe I could take over the ranch accounts. Keep track of expenses and income, that sort of thing. Harrison looked surprised, then pleased. That would actually be incredibly helpful. I'm not bad with figures, but I'll admit it's not my favorite task. Are you sure you want to take that on? I'd like to feel useful, contributing in a meaningful way. Josephine took a sip of water, and it would help me learn about the ranch too. Understanding the finances gives a clear picture of how everything works. Then the job is yours. I'll show you all the ledgers and records tonight. Harrison's smile was genuine. See, I told you we'd make a good team. They finished the fence repairs by early afternoon. On the drive back, they encountered a small herd of cattle. Harrison stopped the wagon, pointing out different animals and explaining their characteristics. He showed her how to identify which calves belonged to which cows, how to spot signs of illness or injury. Josephine found herself fascinated. She'd never given much thought to how beef got to the table, but there was something compelling about seeing the process up close. These weren't just animals. They were Harrison's livelihood, his future, and now hers too. That one there, the calf with the white face, I delivered him myself during a difficult birth last spring, Harrison said, his voice soft with pride. Didn't think he'd make it, but he's strong as anything now. You must care about them a great deal. I do. Each one represents an investment, sure, but they're also living creatures in my care. It's my responsibility to keep them healthy and treat them well. He glanced at her. I suppose that sounds foolish to someone from the city. It doesn't sound foolish at all. It sounds honorable. Josephine meant it. The more time she spent with Harrison, the more she saw the depth of his character. He wasn't flashy or smooth like Marcus had been. But he was solid, genuine, and kind to his core. Back at the house, Hua had dinner preparations well underway. Josephine helped with the cooking, learning how to prepare stew the way Harrison liked it, with plenty of beef and vegetables. Over dinner, Harrison told Hua about Josephine taking over the accounts, and the older woman nodded approvingly. Smart, Hua said. Every good partnership uses each person's strengths. After dinner, as promised, Harrison brought out the ranch ledgers. They sat together at the table, his shoulder brushing hers as he showed her his record-keeping system. It was fairly straightforward, tracking income from cattle sales and expenses for feed, equipment, wages, and supplies. But there was room for improvement in organization. You mind if I set up a new system? Josephine asked. Nothing wrong with what you've been doing, but I learned a method from my father that might make things easier to track. Whatever you think is best, you're the bookkeeper now. Harrison's proximity was distracting. Josephine found herself very aware of the warmth of his body next to hers, the way his voice rumbled when he spoke, the competent way his hands moved across the pages. They worked together for an hour, Harrison explaining his entries, and Josephine making notes on how to reorganize. It was companionable, productive, and felt right in a way Josephine couldn't quite articulate. This was partnership, she realized, working together toward common goals using their individual strengths. You look tired, Harrison said eventually. We should stop for tonight. This can wait. Josephine realized she was exhausted. 2 days of emotional upheaval followed by a full day of physical work had caught up with her. You're right, I should turn in. They stood, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Harrison's eyes were soft in the lamplight, his expression gentle. Josephine felt something shift between them, a subtle change in the air. Then Harrison cleared his throat and stepped back. Sleep well, Josephine. You too, Harrison. In her room, Josephine lay in bed thinking about her husband. He was a good man, possibly the best man she'd ever met. Respectful, hardworking, honest. Everything Marcus had pretended to be, Harrison actually was, and more than that, she was starting to genuinely like him. His quiet humor, his obvious love for his land, the way he listened when she spoke. Was it possible, she wondered, that this marriage of convenience might become something more? The thought both excited and terrified her. The days settled into a rhythm. Mornings began early with breakfast, followed by chores. Josephine helped Lai Hua with cooking and cleaning, worked on organizing the ranch accounts, and accompanied Harrison around the property when he had time to show her more of the ranch. Evenings were spent together, sometimes playing checkers or cards, sometimes just talking. Miguel and Tom returned after a week, two weathered cowboys who eyed Josephine with curiosity but treated her with respect once Harrison made it clear she was the lady of the house. They were good men, hardworking and loyal, and Josephine quickly grew comfortable having them around. The ranch kept everyone busy. Autumn was approaching, which meant preparing for winter, a massive undertaking. There was hay to cut and store, wood to chop, equipment to repair. Josephine threw herself into the work, determined to prove her worth. She learned to can vegetables from Lai Hua, to mend fences and saddles, to ride the gentle chestnut mare Harrison had given her. 2 weeks after their wedding, Harrison taught Josephine to shoot. Every ranch wife should know how to handle a gun, he said, setting up targets behind the barn. Rattlesnakes, coyotes, sometimes worse. You need to be able to protect yourself. The rifle was heavy and loud, and Josephine's first attempts were laughably bad. But Harrison was patient, adjusting her stance, showing her how to sight down the barrel. His arms came around her from behind, his hands covering hers on the rifle, and Josephine's breath caught at the contact. "Like this," he said softly, his breath warm against her ear. "Breathe steady, squeeze the trigger gently." The shot rang out, and this time Josephine hit the target. She whooped with delight, turning in Harrison's arms without thinking. They were suddenly face to face, inches apart, and the air between them crackled with tension. "I hit it," Josephine said, though her voice came out breathless. "You did." Harrison's eyes had darkened, his gaze dropping to her lips. For a moment Josephine thought he might kiss her. She wanted him to. But then he stepped back, breaking the spell. "Try again. Let's see if you can do it without help." She managed 2 more successful shots, though her hands trembled slightly. She told herself it was from the rifle's recoil, not from the lingering sensation of Harrison's arms around her. That night, lying in bed, Josephine had to acknowledge what she'd been feeling for days now. She was falling for her husband. It wasn't the wild, passionate love of novels, but something quieter and deeper. Respect mixed with affection, attraction mixed with genuine liking. She enjoyed his company, looked forward to seeing him each morning, felt safe and valued in his presence. The question was, did Harrison feel the same way? He was always kind, always respectful, but he maintained a careful distance. He never tried to kiss her beyond the chaste pecks he sometimes gave her forehead. He never suggested she move into his room. It was everything he'd promised, giving her space and time. But now Josephine found herself wishing he'd push those boundaries just a little. October arrived with cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn color in the cottonwoods. The ranch hands drove a portion of the herd to market, returning with a satisfying profit that Josephine carefully recorded in the ledgers. She was proud of the new system she'd implemented, which gave Harrison a much clearer picture of the ranch's financial health. "We're doing better than I thought," Harrison said, studying the numbers. "Thanks to your organization, I can see exactly where we stand. We might be able to expand faster than I planned." "That's wonderful." Josephine smiled at his enthusiasm. What would expansion look like? More land, if any comes available, more cattle, maybe another hired hand or two. Harrison looked up from the ledgers. What do you think? You're my partner in this. Your opinion matters. The fact that he truly meant it made Josephine's heart swell. I think if we can afford it comfortably without overextending, expansion makes sense. But we should keep a good reserve too, in case of drought or disease or other emergencies. Smart thinking. Harrison's eyes were warm as they looked at her. I'm lucky I found you, Josephine. I'm the lucky one, she replied softly. You gave me a home when I had nothing, a purpose, a future. We gave each other those things, Harrison corrected. This marriage, it's been good for both of us, don't you think? I do. Josephine hesitated, then decided to be brave. Harrison, can I ask you something? Of course. Always. Are you happy? With this arrangement, I mean, with me? Harrison's expression softened. He reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. Josephine, I'm more than happy. These past weeks, having you here, they've been some of the best of my life. You've made this house feel like a home. You've become a true partner, and more than that, I've come to care for you. A great deal. Josephine's heart raced. You have. I have. Harrison stood, coming around the table but not releasing her hand. I didn't expect it to happen so quickly. I thought we'd build a friendship first, maybe over years. But Josephine, somewhere between teaching you to make biscuits and watching you master the account books, I started falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them. Love. He'd said love. Josephine stood, her hand still clasped in his. Harrison, I've been feeling the same way. I didn't want to presume, didn't want to push. You've been so respectful of my space and my time to adjust. But the truth is, I've adjusted. I don't need my own room anymore. I don't need distance. I want to be your wife in every sense of the word. Harrison's eyes searched hers, looking for doubt or uncertainty. Are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured, I'm sure. Josephine stepped closer, closing the distance between them. I love you, Harrison Riley, completely and truly. The smile that broke across Harrison's face was radiant. Then his hands came up to cup her face, and he kissed her. Not the chaste pecks from before, but a real kiss, deep and passionate and full of promise. Josephine melted into it, her arms wrapping around his neck, finally allowing herself to feel everything she'd been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Harrison rested his forehead against hers. I love you too, Josephine Riley, so very much. Show me, she whispered. Show me your room, our room. Harrison needed no further invitation. He swept her up in his arms, making her laugh, and carried her down the hallway. Their wedding night might have been delayed by several weeks, but when it finally came, it was worth the wait. Harrison was gentle and patient, taking his time, making sure Josephine felt cherished and loved. And when morning came, they woke tangled together in his large bed, smiling at each other like fools. Good morning, wife, Harrison said, pressing a kiss to her bare shoulder. Good morning, husband, Josephine replied, turning to face him fully. I could get used to this. You'd better. I'm not letting you go back to your own room now. They eventually emerged for breakfast, trying to look presentable but probably fooling no one. Lai Hua took one look at their glowing faces and satisfied expressions, and simply smiled knowingly. About time, was all she said, but her tone was approving. Life on the ranch continued, but everything felt different now. The partnership they'd built was now layered with genuine love and physical intimacy. Harrison was more openly affectionate, stealing kisses in the barn, holding her hand as they walked, pulling her close while they looked over the accounts. Josephine bloomed under his attention, growing more confident in her role as ranch wife and partner. Winter arrived in earnest, bringing snow to the high country and cold winds to the ranch. But the house was warm and well stocked. And Josephine loved the cozy evenings by the fire, reading while Harrison worked on leather repairs or planning for spring. Sometimes they'd talk for hours, learning more about each other, sharing dreams and fears and hopes. "I want children someday," Harrison admitted one night as they lay in bed, snow falling softly outside the window. "I didn't want to bring it up before, didn't want you to feel that was an expectation, but I hope we'll have a family." "I want that too," Josephine said, nestling closer to his warmth. "A house full of children, teaching them about books and ranching and how to be good people. They'll have an amazing mother." Harrison's hand splayed across her stomach. "And when the time comes, I'll be the happiest man alive." The time came sooner than they expected. By December, Josephine realized she'd missed her monthly courses. A visit to the doctor in Copper Ridge confirmed it. She was expecting a baby, due sometime in early summer. Harrison's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, before setting her down carefully as if she might break. "We're having a baby," he kept repeating. "We're going to be parents. Are you happy?" Josephine asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy, Josephine, I'm ecstatic. Terrified, but ecstatic." He pulled her close, his hand protective on her still flat stomach. "You've given me everything. A partner, a love, and now a child. I don't know what I did to deserve you." "You paid my bill at the inn," Josephine teased, and then proposed at breakfast. "Best investment you ever made, absolutely the best investment." Harrison kissed her soundly. "I love you, Josephine Riley." "I love you too." The winter passed with Josephine's pregnancy progressing normally. She felt well enough to continue most of her duties, though Harrison and Lai Hua conspired to keep her from overexerting herself. Harrison was adorably overprotective, worried about every little thing, but Josephine found his concern endearing rather than smothering. Spring arrived with the usual flurry of ranching activity. New calves being born, fences needing repair after winter, preparations for moving the herd to summer grazing. Josephine's belly swelled steadily, and she loved feeling the baby move inside her, loved watching Harrison's face light up whenever he felt a kick. "Have you thought about names?" Lai Hua asked one afternoon as they shelled peas together on the porch. "We have a few ideas. James if it's a boy, after Harrison's father. Emily if it's a girl, after my mother." Josephine rubbed her belly. "Though Harrison says we should wait until we meet the baby to decide for sure." "Wise man, your husband." Lai Hua's eyes twinkled. "You love him very much, yes?" "More than I thought possible." Josephine looked out at where Harrison worked with Tom and Miguel in the near pasture. Even from a distance, she could pick out his form, the way he moved, the set of his shoulders. "When we married, I thought I was settling for security. I never imagined I'd find real love. The best love stories are the unexpected ones," Lai Hua said wisely. "The ones that grow from respect and partnership, not just passion. That kind of love lasts." July brought scorching heat and finally labor. It started in the middle of the night, waking Josephine with sharp pains. Harrison, true to form, panicked spectacularly, running around trying to gather supplies and fetch Lai Hua and boil water all at once. "Harrison," Josephine said firmly, gripping his hand during a contraction. "Calm down. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. I'll be fine." "But what if something goes wrong? Should I ride for the doctor?" Lai Hua has delivered dozens of babies, and the doctor is 3 hours away. "We'll manage." She squeezed his hand harder as another contraction hit. "But you can stay with me. I want you here." So Harrison stayed, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, murmuring encouragements. Lai Hua directed everything with calm competence, and as dawn broke over the ranch, a baby's cry filled the air. "It's a boy," Lai Hua announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Josephine's chest. A healthy, strong boy. Josephine looked down at her son, counting fingers and toes, marveling at the tiny person they'd created. Harrison leaned over them both, his eyes wet with tears. "He's perfect," Harrison whispered. "Absolutely perfect, just like his mother." "James Harrison Riley," Josephine said softly. "Welcome to the world, little one." The baby opened his eyes, unfocused but searching, and Josephine felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. This was her son, hers and Harrison's, the product of their love and their partnership. Harrison carefully took the baby, holding him with exaggerated care, his large hands gentle. "Hello, James, I'm your father, and I promise to love you and your mother and keep you both safe for all my days." Watching her husband hold their son, Josephine felt overwhelmed with gratitude. A year ago, she'd been stranded and desperate in Copper Ridge. Now she had a husband who loved her, a son she adored, and a home she'd helped build. Life had a funny way of working out. James proved to be a good baby, healthy and relatively easy. He had Harrison's hazel eyes and Josephine's dark hair, and he was doted on by everyone on the ranch. Miguel carved him a wooden horse, Tom taught him to laugh with silly faces, and Lai Hua sang him Chinese lullabies that seemed to calm him instantly. As for Harrison, he was a natural father. He'd wake in the night to help with feedings, change diapers without complaint, and could be found at all hours just staring at his son with wonder. "I can't believe we made this," he'd say. "This perfect little person." Life settled into a new rhythm, one that included a baby's needs alongside the ranch's demands. Josephine managed both with help from Lai Hua and Harrison, who insisted she rest and recover properly. The ranch continued to prosper, the cattle herd growing, the finances healthy. When James was 6 months old, Harrison surprised Josephine with a gift, a small bookshelf filled with books he'd special ordered from San Francisco. "For you," he said. "I know you've been too busy to read much lately, but I wanted you to have them anyway, and someday we'll read them to James." Josephine threw her arms around him, touched beyond words. "You remembered." "Of course I remembered. I remember everything you've ever told me." Harrison kissed the top of her head. "You gave up a lot when you married me, left your old life behind. I want to make sure you have pieces of it here too." "Harrison, I didn't give up anything that mattered. I gained everything that does." Josephine pulled back to look at him. "You, this ranch, our son, our life together. This is everything I never knew I wanted. Still, you deserve books." He gestured to the shelf. "So you'll have them, always." Time passed in the way it does on a ranch, measured by seasons and cattle sales and the growth of a child. James learned to walk, to talk, to ride a horse before he could read. Harrison taught him about ranching, and Josephine taught him letters and numbers. Lai Hua, who showed no signs of slowing down despite her age, taught him patience and how to grow things. When James was 3, Josephine discovered she was pregnant again. This time it was a girl, born in spring, with Harrison's smile and a head full of blonde curls that came from some distant ancestor. They named her Sarah, after Harrison's mother, and she was as headstrong and determined as her namesake had reportedly been. The ranch continued to expand. Harrison bought additional land when it became available, increasing the herd to 500 head. Tom married a girl from Copper Ridge and brought her to live in a house. Harrison helped him build on the property. Miguel, content with bachelorhood, stayed in the bunkhouse but became like an uncle to the children. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Harrison surprised Josephine with a trip to San Francisco. Lai Hua and Tom's wife agreed to watch the children for a week, and Harrison and Josephine took the train to the coast. The city was overwhelming after years on the ranch, but it was also exciting. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate at restaurants, and visited shops. But the highlight for Josephine was the bookstore Harrison took her to, a massive establishment with 3 floors of books. "Buy whatever you want," Harrison said, handing her a thick stack of bills. "I mean it. Whatever you want." Josephine spent 2 glorious hours browsing, finally selecting a dozen books ranging from novels to poetry to ranching journals. As the clerk wrapped them, Harrison added a beautiful leather-bound journal to the stack. "For your own writing," he said when Josephine looked at him questioningly. "You've lived quite a story these past 5 years. Maybe it's time you wrote it down." That night, lying in their hotel bed, Josephine turned to Harrison. "Thank you for this trip. For the books, for the time away, for everything. Thank you for saying yes 5 years ago." Harrison pulled her close. "Best breakfast proposal I ever made." "Best breakfast proposal you ever made? How many have you made?" "Just the one. And it worked out pretty well, don't you think?" He kissed her slowly. "I love you, Josephine. More today than the day we married, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today." "That's quite a promise." "It's not a promise, it's a fact." Harrison's eyes were serious. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, you and our children. Everything good in my life started the day I walked into that inn and saw you." Josephine felt tears prick her eyes. "I was so lost that day, so scared. And then you appeared like some kind of guardian angel in dusty cowboy clothes." "Guardian angel," Harrison laughed. "I'm no angel. I'm just a rancher who recognized something special when he saw it." "Well, this special something loves you very much." Josephine kissed him, now and always. They returned to the ranch refreshed and happy to see their children again. James, now 5, had 1,000 things to tell them about everything that had happened in their absence. Sarah, just 2, mostly clung to Josephine and demanded cuddles. The years continued to pass. James grew into a fine young man, serious and responsible like his father but with his mother's love of learning. He divided his time between ranch work and reading, often found with a book in one hand and a lasso in the other. Sarah was a force of nature, equally comfortable riding horses or playing with dolls, bossy and loving in equal measure. When James was 10, they had another child, a surprise baby boy they named Robert. Harrison joked that he was getting too old for midnight feedings at 37, but he loved the new addition as fiercely as he loved his other children. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Josephine's careful bookkeeping helped them navigate economic downturns and take advantage of opportunities. Harrison's skill with cattle and land management meant they had some of the healthiest, most productive rangeland in the territory. Together, they built something lasting. Lihua passed away peacefully in her sleep when she was 79. She'd lived to see all 3 children grow, to know she was loved and valued, to be part of a family. They buried her on the ranch, under the cottonwoods, and planted a garden in her memory that Josephine and Sarah tended together. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Harrison and Josephine sat on their porch watching the sunset. Their children were in various stages of growth. James at 20 was practically running the ranch alongside his father. Sarah at 17 was preparing to become a teacher, and Robert at 10 was still deciding what he wanted to be when he grew up. 20 years, Harrison said, shaking his head. Some days it feels like 20 minutes, and other days it feels like you've always been here. I have been here in all the ways that matter. Josephine took his hand, noting the silver in his hair, the lines around his eyes. He was still handsome to her, still the man who'd offered her hope when she had none. Do you ever regret it? The impulsive proposal at breakfast? Not for a single second, do you? Do you regret saying yes? Josephine thought back to that morning 20 years ago, sitting across from a stranger in an inn's dining room making the craziest decision of her life. "Not for a single second," she echoed. "You gave me everything, Harrison. Love, home, family, purpose. Everything." "We gave each other those things," Harrison corrected, "just as he had all those years ago. This life we built it together. Equal partners." "Equal partners," Josephine agreed. Through everything, Harrison confirmed. He pulled her close, and they sat together watching their land, their legacy, spread out before them. The rolling R had grown from 200 acres to over 1,000, from 200 head of cattle to nearly 1,000. It would be divided among their children someday, a testament to hard work and love. "Tell me something," Harrison said after a while. "If you could go back and tell that scared young woman at the inn anything, what would it say?" Josephine considered the question. "I'd tell her that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments. That being abandoned and desperate would lead to being loved and secure. That the stranger who pays your bill might just be your soulmate." She looked up at Harrison. "What would you tell the man who walked into that inn?" "I'd tell him to trust his instincts. That helping that woman with sad eyes would be the best decision he ever made. That proposing over breakfast wasn't crazy, it was fate." Harrison kissed her forehead. "And I'd tell him to get ready, because the next 20 years are going to be the adventure of a lifetime." "Only 20, Josephine teased. "I'm planning on at least 40 more. 40 more it is, then. I'd better get busy making them good ones." "You always do, Harrison, you always do." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Nevada sky in shades of orange and purple, Harrison and Josephine remained on their porch, hand in hand. Behind them, their children laughed and talked over dinner. Around them, their ranch hummed with the life they'd built. And between them, love bloomed as strong and true as the day they'd spoken their vows under the open sky. The years that followed were full and rich. James married a schoolteacher from Carson City, a clever woman named Grace who fit into the family perfectly. They built a house on the north section of the ranch and started their own family. Sarah became a teacher as planned but met and married a lawyer from Reno, dividing her time between teaching and helping her husband with his growing practice. Robert, after years of trying different pursuits, discovered a talent for breeding horses and established a successful business on the ranch. Harrison and Josephine became grandparents, then great-grandparents. The ranch stayed in the family, divided and managed by their descendants but never sold off or forgotten. The original house was expanded and updated but maintained, a testament to everything they'd built. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered for a celebration. Harrison was 76 now, his hair completely silver, his face weathered by decades under the Nevada sun. Josephine was 72, her dark hair streaked with gray, her hands marked by age but still strong. They stood together as their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren toasted them. Stories were told about the ranch's history, about Hua and her wisdom, about Tom and Miguel who had become part of the family. James told his own children about the day his parents met, about the breakfast proposal that had started it all. "Can you imagine," James said, laughing, "father proposing to mother over biscuits having just met the day before?" "Best decision I ever made," Harrison said firmly, his arm around Josephine. "No regrets." "None at all," Josephine agreed. She looked around at the gathered family, at the love and laughter filling the room. Every person here existed because she'd said yes that morning 50 years ago. Every happiness, every success, every moment of joy could be traced back to that one brave decision. After the party, as evening fell and the family dispersed to various houses and bunkhouses on the property, Harrison and Josephine returned to their bedroom. It was the same room they'd shared for 50 years, though the furniture had been updated and the walls repainted countless times. "Tired?" Harrison asked as Josephine sat on the bed, exhausted, but happy. She looked at him, this man who'd been her partner through everything. "Can you believe we've been married 50 years? Some days I still feel like that nervous cowboy proposing to a stranger over breakfast." Harrison sat beside her, taking her hand. "Other days, I feel like I've known you my entire life. Both are true in a way." Josephine rested her head on his shoulder. "We've grown up together, grown old together, built a life together. Any regrets?" "Not a single one. You?" "Not one." Harrison kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Josephine Riley. Have loved you for 50 years and will love you for whatever time we have left." "I love you too, Harrison Riley. Thank you for paying my bill at the inn. Thank you for proposing at breakfast. Thank you for giving me a life beyond my wildest dreams." They sat together in comfortable silence, two people who'd started as strangers and become soulmates. Outside, the Nevada night was clear and full of stars. The ranch stretched out in darkness, peaceful and prosperous. And in the main house, Harrison and Josephine Riley held hands and counted their blessings. Harrison passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 81. He'd been active until nearly the end, still riding out to check cattle, still making decisions about the ranch. Josephine was with him when he went, holding his hand, whispering that she loved him. She grieved deeply but not hopelessly. They'd had 55 years together, built a legacy that would last for generations. His loss left a hole in her heart, but she was surrounded by family and love and memories enough to fill several lifetimes. Josephine lived another 6 years, remaining sharp and engaged until the very end. She spent her final years surrounded by her great-grandchildren, telling them stories about the old days, about a young woman abandoned at an inn and the cowboy who'd saved her. "Was it really love at first sight?" one great-granddaughter asked. "No," Josephine said honestly. "It was something better. It was respect at first sight, partnership at first conversation, and love that grew day by day. The best kind of love doesn't explode into being. It builds like a house, one board at a time until you look around one day and realize you've created something beautiful and lasting." She passed away in her sleep at age 84, in the same bed where she'd spent 55 years with Harrison. Her family buried her beside him under the cottonwoods, not far from Li Hua's grave. 3 simple headstones marking 3 remarkable lives. The ranch continued under family management, passed down through generations. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the Nevada sky burned with sunset, ranch hands would swear they could see 2 figures on the main house porch, sitting close together, hand in hand, watching over the land they'd built together. The story of Harrison and Josephine Riley became family legend, told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the best love stories start in the most unlikely ways. That kindness to strangers can change lives. That respect and partnership make a stronger foundation than passion alone. And that saying yes to breakfast can lead to a lifetime of happiness. In Copper Ridge, which grew from a small town to a modest city over the years, there's a plaque at the site where the old inn once stood. It tells the story of Josephine Keller, who was abandoned there with no money, and Harrison Riley, who paid her bill and proposed at breakfast. It's a love story for the ages, they say. A testament to the best of the Wild West, when cowboys were heroes and love could bloom in the most unexpected places. And if you talk to the descendants of the Riley family, they'll tell you it's all true. Every word. They'll show you the original ranch house, carefully preserved. They'll show you the old account ledgers in Josephine's neat handwriting. They'll take you to the graves under the cottonwoods and tell you about love that lasted more than half a century. But most importantly, they'll tell you that Harrison and Josephine's greatest legacy wasn't the land or the cattle, or even the family they created. It was the example they set, that true love is built on respect, honesty, partnership, and the courage to take chances on each other, even when logic says you shouldn't. That's the kind of love that lasts. That's the kind of love that matters. That's the kind of love that changed everything for two strangers who met at an inn in Nevada territory and built a life that would echo through generations. And it all started with a simple act of kindness and a breakfast proposal that changed two lives forever.